Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics. This week's questions answered video, cross-loading magazines for self-defense purposes. Cross-loading, if you're not familiar, is the idea or the practice of putting two or more types of ammunition in a magazine for a specific type of purpose. The idea behind it is that either you'll put in some rounds in there to let you know when you're running out of ammunition, or you'll put different rounds in there to do different things based on some kind of prediction of the situation in which you're going to use the firearm in. Across the board, it's not a practice I agree with because, again, it tries to predict the future. One of the most common things I've seen people mention is their first 2 or 3 rounds in their handgun are going to be ball ammunition so they can punch through something. No, don't do that. Because again, it goes back into predicting the future. It's kind of a irresponsible behavior because again, you're trying to predict the future. You already have it in your mind in your little gunfight self-defense fantasy that you know the situation in which you're going to use your firearm and you're loading the first couple of rounds with that prediction in mind. If you go back to the 90s, maybe even a little further, you saw people using rounds such as like the Glazer safety slug. They were going to have their first 2 rounds out be that because of X reason, or because I got to shoot through a wall, or I might have to deal with a windshield, or any number of other fanciful motivations for their first couple rounds being one type or another. The FMJ is the most common one I've seen, but I've also seen somebody say, well, my first couple rounds out are going to be like plus P plus, and then different rounds after that. And as regards to a handgun, what I'm really talking about right now, but even with rifles, you see it sometimes. You see guys say, well, my first couple rounds out of my carry magazine in my vehicle rifle are going to be green tip because those go through cars very well, which is not necessarily wrong. They do perform pretty well through vehicle bodies, not so well through vehicle glass, especially the windshield. And then my last 2 rounds in my magazine are going to be tracers to let me know that I'm about to run out of ammo. For military, I guess I could kind of agree with that. The average self-defense shooter, I don't really understand where you're going with that. My personal feeling is when the rifle's out of ammo, the rifle will tell me it's out of ammo. It actually literally will tell you that it's out of ammunition. So, I mean, I guess if you want your last 2 rounds in your rifle magazine to be tracers to let you know that you're running out of ammunition, cool. Wouldn't personally recommend it because that knowledge then works both ways. And again, if we're already in fantasy land, then we can assume our bad guy knows that too. Or when you stop shooting at him, he'll realize that either you're moving or you're reloading or any number of things. You see how quickly we can if or suppose different facts to the situation. So as a general rule, I wouldn't agree, especially on the rifle thing, with the last 2 rounds being tracers, but if that's something you want to do, go right ahead. As far as mixing other ammunitions, make sure it's within your 0 if that's something you want to do. I don't think people pay as much attention to their rifle self-defense rounds sometimes as they do their handgun self-defense rounds, which can be somewhat problematic. I've seen people just shooting green tip because that's what the military uses, or just shooting 55 grain because that's what their rifle's zeroed on because that's the most common range ammunition. I don't necessarily agree with that either. There's really good data out there. You should, if you haven't already, you should look into and see what good rifle rounds there are if you're self-defense focused on the rifle. For those of you that are issued a round for duty purposes, you may have to help your administrators and your range masters and whoever's in charge of those ammunition choices see a light and figure out that the round they've chosen is not a good round. I've come in contact with some LE recently. They were shooting a very, very horrible round for duty because the range master liked it, which to me makes me think that the round was cheap and it was easy to get. And they could get a lot of it for a very low price. Sometimes that's literally what duty rounds come down to, is how cheaply they can be had for budgetary concerns. But with your everyday carry handgun, having your first couple rounds be FMJ is kind of a horrible idea. The whole reason behind hollow points is 1, expansion, but 2, a reduced chance of overpenetration through the threat. FMJs just like to punch holes in things, and that's not necessarily a good thing, not only for your potential ability to damage the human body in order to incapacitate your threat, but also if that round goes through your threat and hits something it's not supposed to hit, which is not something that we want. Another thing to consider is different grain weights lead to different recoil, which lead to different problems when it comes to managing the firearm itself, just based on the mechanical operation of the gun and the fundamentals. So short answer, don't do it. Long answer, the whole video before this. If you have any other questions on this topic or any other topic, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. I'm Eric Allen with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.